Queen Letizia Ortiz Roque-Solano, the consort of Spain and one of Europe's most admired royal figures, has once again shown why she is more than just a queen by title but a queen with purpose, with presence, and with an unshakable connection to the people of her country. In a moment that has captured the nation's heart, she publicly addressed those who have been directly affected by the devastating fires in Galicia, a region that has known both the beauty of its landscapes and the heartbreak of natural disaster. Standing alongside King Felipe VI, her words were not just an obligatory royal statement but a deeply human message, resonating with empathy and strength, echoing across Spain and beyond. When Queen Letizia speaks, it is never merely ceremonial, and in this case, it carried a weight that connected history, emotion, and leadership in a way that only she can deliver. The fires in Galicia are not just another natural tragedy on the list of unfortunate events Spain has faced in recent years. They have shaken communities, destroyed homes, and left families without livelihoods. Entire towns have been blanketed in smoke, forests reduced to ash, and countless lives disrupted. Galicia, with its lush green hills, Atlantic coastline, and deep-rooted traditions, has always stood as one of Spain's proud cultural regions, but in the face of fire, it has become a place of mourning and resilience. It is in moments like these that a nation looks to its leaders, not only for practical action but for words of hope, for symbols of solidarity, for gestures that prove that their pain has not gone unnoticed. Queen Letizia understood this need, and with King Felipe by her side, she chose to speak with authenticity, acknowledging the suffering of those affected and honoring the extraordinary courage of emergency workers who have risked everything to save lives. Observers of Spanish royal life know well that Letizia, long before she became queen, was a journalist. Words have always been her tool, her craft, her bridge to the world. She knows the value of phrasing, the rhythm of communication, the impact of a carefully chosen sentence. That background was evident in her delivery about Galicia. Her statement was not filled with distant platitudes or cold protocol. Instead, it carried the warmth of someone who has walked in the streets of ordinary Spaniards, someone who has reported on disasters before from the ground, and who now carries the privilege and burden of delivering comfort as queen. It was a speech shaped not by palace walls but by the heartbeat of humanity. King Felipe, ever the steady hand of the Spanish monarchy, stood with her in unified presence. While Felipe often embodies the institutional stability of the crown, Letizia brings the sharp-edged clarity of personal empathy, and together they form a leadership dynamic that resonates across Spain's diverse regions. When the fires began spreading uncontrollably, when the news outlets filled their broadcasts with images of villages wrapped in flames, when Galicia's people were evacuating their homes with only the essentials, it was inevitable that attention would turn to the palace. What would the royals say? What would they do? Letizia's choice to speak publicly, without hiding behind vague statements, was as symbolic as it was necessary. She gave voice to grief, but also to resilience. She acknowledged pain, but also reminded the people that they are not alone. Her words painted pictures of solidarity, calling on the strength of Galicia's culture, its music, its literature, its unique spirit of community that has survived centuries of challenges. She highlighted the extraordinary bravery of firefighters, the volunteers, and the neighbors who opened their doors to shelter the displaced. In one of her most moving moments, she mentioned the children who have lost not only their houses but their sense of safety, emphasizing that the trauma of disaster is not limited to physical damage but also lingers in the emotional scars carried forward. This message was a turning point for many who had been watching in silence. Social media in Spain lit up with responses, with people praising the Queen for her compassion, sharing clips of her speech, and quoting her lines as a reminder that leadership is not always about laws and decrees, but also about words that can heal. Some commentators noted that Letizia's intervention had echoes of the great moments of human leadership seen in other nations during times of disaster, when figures like Queen Elizabeth II in Britain or Queen Margrethe of Denmark spoke during times of crisis. Yet Letizia's voice carried a distinct Spanish authenticity, grounded in her own experience as a woman who once reported the news, and who now, ironically, becomes the news herself when she speaks. The fires themselves have left a scar not only on the land but also on Spain's environmental consciousness. Galicia is a region famed for its forests, its biodiversity, and its agriculture. To see that beauty threatened by flames is a reminder of the fragility of nature in the face of climate extremes. Scientists have already pointed out that such disasters are becoming more frequent, fueled by hotter summers and changing weather patterns. Letizia, in her remarks, did not ignore this reality. She acknowledged that Spain must confront these challenges not only with emergency responses but with long-term commitment to protecting nature, strengthening local communities, and investing in resilience. For many, hearing such reflections from a royal figure elevated the discourse from mere sympathy to a call for action. But beyond the politics and policies, the human side of the story remained central. Letizia's presence gave comfort to families who had lost everything. For an elderly couple in a Galician village, knowing that the Queen spoke directly about their plight was a gesture that carried immeasurable emotional weight. For the children watching from evacuation centers, the idea that their Queen thought of them made them feel seen and heard. This is the intangible power of monarchy in modern society, not in decrees or in governance, but in human symbolism. The fires in Galicia have united Spain in grief and solidarity. Communities far from Galicia have sent aid, volunteers, and financial support. The royal family's words have acted as a unifying force, reminding Spaniards that in times of crisis, they are one nation. Felipe's steady presence and Letizia's heartfelt speech became two sides of the same coin: stability and compassion, strength and warmth. It is this combination that has defined their reign and continues to shape the monarchy's place in Spanish society. As the days continue and recovery begins, Letizia's statement will remain a marker in the timeline of this disaster. It is a moment that will be remembered not only in Galicia but across Spain, a reminder of how leadership can be felt through empathy as much as through action. The royal family will continue to support recovery efforts, but this speech has already left its mark. It has set the tone for how Spain will process its grief and rebuild its hope. What makes this story so powerful is that it transcends the specifics of one region's tragedy. It speaks to the broader idea of how leaders, especially in constitutional monarchies, can bridge the gap between tradition and modern responsibility. Letizia did not speak as a distant figure but as a queen who has lived through Spain's modern struggles, who has witnessed human suffering firsthand as a journalist, and who now stands in a position to amplify the voices of those in pain. That dual perspective is rare, and it is what makes her words resonate so deeply. This is not the first time Queen Letizia has demonstrated her gift for empathy in public life, and it will not be the last. But in this moment, as Galicia mourns, as Spain reflects, as the ashes of fire turn into the seeds of renewal, her words have become part of the healing process. The story of Galicia's fires is not only about destruction but also about solidarity, resilience, and the reminder that even in times of devastation, humanity can shine through in the form of compassion. The question that now remains is not just about how Galicia recovers from its current pain but about how Spain as a nation, guided by voices like Queen Letizia's, adapts to an uncertain future. Every fire, every flood, every disaster in modern Europe feels heavier than before, carrying with it the shadows of climate change and the fragility of societies in transition. Letizia's speech, while rooted in the immediate heartbreak of Galicia's losses, was also a reflection on Spain's collective resilience. She spoke of the courage of the people, of the solidarity that unites villages, towns, and cities when devastation strikes. Yet beneath her carefully chosen words, there was a clear undertone: the fight against destruction is no longer occasional but continuous. For many Spaniards, this message was more than symbolic. Galicia is not only a cultural treasure but also a strategic region, with its forests providing economic lifelines, its coastline sustaining fishing industries, and its people embodying one of the strongest senses of identity in Spain. The fires did not just burn trees and homes, they struck at the heart of Galicia's pride, its heritage, and its rhythm of life. That is why Letizia's decision to speak so openly carried weight. It reassured Galicians that their suffering was not invisible to Madrid, not lost in the bureaucracy of government reports, but acknowledged at the highest symbolic level of the nation. In moments like this, Spain remembers why monarchy still matters. In a modern democracy, the monarchy has no executive power, it cannot pass laws, it cannot direct government responses. But it carries the power of presence. It holds the ability to unite people under a single voice, to remind citizens that their stories matter, to provide a bridge between politics and humanity. Queen Letizia embodies this role in a distinctly modern way. Unlike monarchs of the past who often delivered distant and formal remarks, she speaks with the cadence of someone who has lived among ordinary people. Her words are infused with humanity because she has not been insulated her whole life within palace walls. That is why Galicians listened and why the wider Spanish population felt a surge of pride when they heard her. King Felipe's role in this moment cannot be underestimated either. Felipe has consistently presented himself as the guardian of Spain's constitutional stability. Where Letizia brings intimacy, Felipe brings continuity. Standing together, they represented not just compassion but also the enduring fabric of Spain. Their public appearance, shoulder to shoulder, was a reminder that Spain's monarchy is not divided between empathy and duty but is strengthened by the combination of both. For Galicians who saw the flames devour hectares of forest, the sight of Felipe and Letizia together was not merely ceremonial, it was reassuring. It was a promise that the royal family's gaze was fixed on them in their darkest hour. Social reactions to Letizia's speech tell us even more about its impact. Spanish media outlets replayed her words repeatedly, highlighting the most poignant moments in which she mentioned the bravery of firefighters and the vulnerability of children. Online, hashtags related to Galicia's tragedy trended, but so did quotes from Letizia's message, transforming her words into shared digital banners of resilience. Influential voices on Spanish Twitter and Instagram praised her for rising above protocol and connecting directly with the human side of the crisis. Commentators on television compared her delivery to the emotional interventions of Princess Diana during her humanitarian visits in the 1990s, noting that Letizia, too, carries the ability to look beyond the formality of her position and into the soul of a community in pain. Of course, not all reactions were uncritical. Some skeptics in the Spanish press suggested that words, no matter how heartfelt, must be matched by concrete action, and they pointed out that the monarchy, while symbolic, does not hold direct responsibility for mobilizing resources. Yet even those critical voices acknowledged that Letizia's ability to highlight the plight of Galicia forced national leaders, government officials, and international partners to pay closer attention. In that sense, her words became a lever, a spotlight, a catalyst for action. By speaking, she ensured that Galicia's tragedy was not buried in a crowded news cycle but remained front and center in the national conversation. The fires have already reignited debates in Spain about environmental protection, land management, and climate adaptation. Experts argue that Spain's regions must invest more heavily in preventive measures, controlled burns, reforestation, community-based emergency planning. And yet, beyond the technical policies, there is the need for collective willpower, for solidarity among citizens. This is where Letizia's role becomes most crucial. As queen, she cannot legislate, but she can inspire. She can give people the sense that their efforts matter, that their resilience is part of a larger national story. That is precisely what she did in her public message about Galicia. The human stories that surround the fires amplify the Queen's message. Take, for example, the tale of a young Galician family forced to flee their farmhouse with only minutes to spare, leaving behind not only their belongings but also the generations of history embedded in their land. Or the story of elderly villagers who stood together in prayer as flames threatened their chapel, the spiritual heart of their community. These stories, painful as they are, remind us of the stakes behind the statistics of hectares burned or properties destroyed. When Letizia referenced these human experiences in her words, she validated them, turning personal grief into shared national mourning. Her speech also connected to a larger European conversation about resilience and climate. Across the continent, fires in Greece, Portugal, and Italy have scarred landscapes in recent summers. Letizia's intervention, though focused on Galicia, carried echoes that were heard beyond Spain's borders. It was as if she were speaking for all Europeans living under the shadow of increasingly unpredictable disasters. Her call for solidarity, for collective strength, resonated not just with Spaniards but with anyone who has seen their land and life threatened by natural forces beyond control. There is also a symbolic resonance in the fact that Letizia herself comes from Asturias, a northern region not far from Galicia. She understands the culture, the people, the rhythm of life in Spain's northwestern provinces. This connection made her words even more personal. She was not an outsider speaking to a distant community, she was a daughter of northern Spain addressing her neighbors. This authenticity strengthened her credibility and deepened the emotional impact of her message. As the recovery process unfolds, the royal family is expected to visit Galicia, meeting families, firefighters, and local leaders. If history is a guide, These visits will be filled with intimate moments, handshakes with exhausted emergency workers, embraces with families who lost their homes, quiet prayers in churches where communities seek hope. These gestures will amplify the Queen's words, turning them from a message of comfort into a continuous presence of solidarity. And every one of those moments will carry the symbolic weight of the monarchy, reaffirming its role as the nation's emotional anchor. Looking at the broader history of Spain's monarchy, this episode may become one of those defining moments that shape the legacy of Felipe and Letizia's reign. Just as King Juan Carlos is remembered for his role during Spain's democratic transition, and as Queen Sofia is remembered for her quiet humanitarian presence, Letizia is carving out her place as the queen who gives voice to empathy in the face of disaster. Her strength is not in political power but in the clarity of her human connection, in the way she can articulate grief without drowning in it, and in the way she can transform tragedy into a narrative of resilience. Spain will continue to face challenges, economic, environmental, social, and political. But this moment in Galicia reveals something essential about the role of leadership in the 21st century, that in an era where people often feel disconnected from institutions, it is empathy, authenticity, and presence that restore trust. Queen Letizia and King Felipe have given Spain exactly that in this time of crisis. As night falls over Galicia and the smoke clears, families will begin the slow process of rebuilding. Trees will be replanted, houses reconstructed, lives reimagined. Yet long after the ashes are gone, the memory of this tragedy will linger, as will the memory of a queen who chose to speak not from a distance but from the heart. Her words will remain etched in Spain's collective memory as a reminder of what it means to lead with humanity. And so, as we close this chapter, we are left with a final reflection that stretches far beyond Galicia, far beyond Spain, and into the very question of how we face the crises of our century. In times of devastation, will we allow tragedy to divide us, or will we follow the example of Queen Letizia's compassion and use empathy as the foundation for unity and renewal?